Hi, I'm Anita Walker, Executive Director of the Mass Cultural Council, and welcome to our Culture Chat today. I am delighted to have joining us Brooke DiGiovanni Evans, who is the Director of Learning at the Museum of Fine Arts right here in Boston. And welcome to our chat today, Brooke.
Thanks for having me, Anita. It's exciting to be here.
I can't imagine really a more relevant guest and a more relevant topic as we try to focus on the power of culture and the arts, even in these difficult times. But you spend a lot of your time working with the medical community which has been shouldering an enormous burden since this COVID crisis came on the scene. And first of all, give us just a little bit of an overview of your work with the medical community here in Massachusetts.
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. It felt like very important work before and now feels even more important. But as the MFA has been working with medical professionals for probably about 15 years, starting with a program at Harvard Medical School called Training the Eye, which was focused on building observation skills for medical students, started by a physician named Dr. Joel Katz, who is very much our partner in this program and in all the programs we do. And out of that, we've just grown even more programs. We work with medical residents now, focusing on improving patient care, focusing on giving them an opportunity to share their perspective of the struggles and the joys that they go through in their work. We tackle difficult conversations like handling a dying patient and how to have conversations about end-of-life issues with patients and their families. So we really run sort of the gamut of different things that physicians are facing in their work. And we do that in strong partnership with the medical community. Obviously, I am an art educator, not a doctor. So I really rely on them as wonderful partners to let us know what they need and how the arts can help them. I should mention another program that we have at the MFA that is overseen by my colleague is called Artful Healing. And that program focuses on bringing art materials and artwork via iPads out to hospitals and to patients and to working with them right in the hospitals. So we're kind of doing both. We're working in the museum and we're working in the hospitals. With the medical
Brooke, I want to talk a little bit in a few minutes about the visual training, but you mentioned your work with residents. And the first time you and I had a conversation about this, I was really, really surprised when you shared some data with me about the suicide rate among residents. Talk a little bit more about that and how the arts can play a role in helping.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely something that that the field struggles with. One of the things that we do in our work is we allow opportunities for people to reflect on what they're experiencing and share those reflections with each other. And we do that through the artwork. So we'll engage people with a particular image and ask them, a very open-ended question about how does this work of art relate to your life at the moment? And through those questions, people share what they're experiencing. They share with each other, both in small groups and larger groups. And what we often hear is, how people didn't realize that their colleagues were feeling similar ways to them and how they're, so relieved to feel that they're sort of not the only one experiencing what they might be experiencing.
And in the context of the current COVID crisis, I feel like I can't open the newspaper without reading another story about, really how painful and difficult it is for our medical professionals who every single day are just looking at death straight on because of the COVID crisis. Are you hearing that this is an issue that perhaps this work you're doing might be able to help as we come through this?
Yeah, that is definitely the hope. And I'm in talks with a physician at MGH at the moment to see if we can do kind of a fun sort of Zoom art intervention for doctors there, which would bring in looking at works of art and again, offer that opportunity for sort of self-reflection and people to share with one another. And I've very much heard from all my partners that in the medical community, they want to continue this work, once we get a little bit more on the other side of this pandemic.
You've been doing this work for quite a while, Brooke.
Mhm.
What is it about art that sort of opens up the safe space or the lines of communications or whatever it is that gives it its healing power?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's two things. One is it gets people out of their normal environment. So they have a chance to be in the museum, a place that's sort of a neutral space in terms of their work. It's not a conference room. It's not, the hallways of the hospital. It's a different space for them. And so I think that allows people to sort of take a breath. Whenever I start my program, I always tell people that there are no emergencies in art. We hope anyway. And so, they're able to relax a little bit. I think the other piece is this idea of using the work of art as a way to start the discussions. It's not everybody sort of sitting around a conference table and just talking. It's looking at the work of art and using that piece to sort of channel what you're thinking and what you're feeling. And it almost, I think, gives people a little bit of distance because they're using that work of art as sort of the conduit to the discussions. And we often, for self-reflection, use a lot of contemporary art, which is very open-ended. There's often not a narrative in the pieces that we choose. And so how people bring meaning to that is very open and allows people to really think abstractly and more openly.
Do some of the physicians say to you, well, I have to tell you, I don't understand art. I don't understand contemporary art. How can this help me explain what I'm feeling?
Yes, we do have some doubters. No, it's true. And sometimes, people will start the program and they'll be like, I don't know, like, is this really going to help? And at the end, I would say, the majority of the people are so appreciative. They really feel like it's had a benefit on their practice. One of the things that we always try and do in all of our activities is we try and make that connection to clinical practice. So it's not only talking about the art, talking only about their reflections, but then how does this impact their work? And we do that through the medical partners that we work with, who help sort of co-facilitate these conversations. And so we're making connections back to work.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the visual training work that you've been doing for quite some
Mm-hmm.
time. But before we get into that, I want to invite the other people who are part of our conversation today to just take a little gander down at the bottom of your laptop screen, and you'll see a little thing that says Q&A. And if you'll click on that, you can send us a question, you can send us a comment. We're really interested in your thoughts on this topic, on the role of the arts and health and well-being and healing. And especially if you are, by any chance, from the medical profession or have any relation to that, we're interested in your thoughts on how this connection and partnership between an art museum and medical centers is really beneficial. So first of all, let's get back to this topic of the visual training. And I know you have some images that you've shared with us, and we'll put them up on the screen. And maybe you can kind of talk us through, what is that all about?
Sure. Yeah. So two of the things that we kind of focus on in our practice is both hard skills and soft skills, is kind of how I define them. And so those hard skills are things like observation skills, communication skills, listening skills. And the more soft skills are things like empathy and ambiguity and understanding how to work with those types of areas. And so I brought in this image of one of my favorite pieces in the collection, which is by an artist named Oscar Kokoschka. And it's a giant painting. It's probably like 5 feet tall. And what we often do with this work of art is we sit down and we ask a series of questions based on a strategy called visual thinking strategies, which was developed by a couple of researchers. And those questions are, what is going on in this painting and what do you see that makes you say that? And so it's an opportunity for people to really dive into looking closely at the work of art, to describe what they're seeing and what they're noticing. And, as you can see, maybe from looking at it on your screen, it is a very ambiguous image. Like, it's these people who are sort of together, but kind of not. Their feet are sort of moving in different directions, and the woman's gaze is, kind of away, but yet she has her hand sort of tenderly on his face. And so it raises a lot of questions about what is happening in this work of art. And through those questions and through the discussion, we get to sort of explore it together as a group.
So in a way, Brooke, what you're saying is for the medical profession, for a doctor, it encourages a doctor to look past a checklist of symptoms, to actually look up from the screen or from the checklist and see what's really going on here with this person. And that helps make a better doctor, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I should add, the third question in the visual thinking strategies theory is, what more can we find? And so we very much lean into that question, to your point. Like, okay, so you've seen what's maybe the obvious, and you've, made a few, check marks on your list, but is there something else that you might be missing? Like, if you look a little bit longer, is there something else that you can see? And we intentionally spend a lot of time with the artwork, even when it feels like the conversation is over, just spending even more time to answer that question and to say, like, what haven't you seen that might be there, and how to spend more time with a work of art and transfer that to with a patient.
You've brought some other examples along. Let's take a look.
Yes, so this is a work by artist Josiah McElhaney, and it's a large sculpture in one of our galleries. And it's a little hard to see in the slide, but basically the vases in the middle are reflected, and they sort of extend on infinitely. And so this work of art, we often have a series of personal reflections on. So the question that we might ask is, again, going back to what I said earlier, kind of, how does this work of art relate to your life at the moment? And some of the most poignant answers that I've got from doctors in using this is, they see that sort of reflection of vases and how it just goes on endlessly. And sometimes that's how you feel when you're facing just, a sea of patients, like they're just kind of going on and on. But one of the things that's beautiful about the piece is each vase has a wonderful sort of pattern to it that's cast by the other vases around it, by the light, and makes it very individual. And so what they say often as the sort of converse of the first statement is, after spending time and after looking, they really start to appreciate and enjoy the uniqueness of each patient. So even though it might extend what seems like for a very long time and be sort of overwhelming, the reason why they got into medical practice is to help each individual person.
Oh, that's a wonderful example. As we change the slide to the next one, I want to remind people who are with us on our chat, give us your thoughts, give us your reflections about the role of the arts in healing and in the medical practice. Brooke, let's take a look at what's next.
Yeah, so this is our Etruscan sarcophagus. And what I should mention, what we try and do through all of these programs is expose people to a variety of different objects in the museum, different cultures, different time periods. For this one, this is the center of a conversation we have around handling death and dying in your patients for the first time. And it is, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, very much the jumping off point for a much deeper discussion. And so we talk about Etruscan culture and how much of what we know is based on the memorial pieces that we have, and invite people to look at the sarcophagus. It has this beautiful image of this couple on the cover that is unique to Etruscan memorial pieces. And then we ask everyone to sit in a circle and talk about their experience facing death and dying in their patients and how they handle that and sort of share with one another. And one of the things that often comes from that discussion is this image that you see on the sarcophagus is sort of this idealized picture of death. It's this beautiful couple that is embracing on top of the sarcophagus. and how so often they don't see that in the hospital. It's the opposite of ideal. But through the discussion, we talk about how different ways that they can make it closer to ideal by having end-of-life discussions sooner with patients, and different ways, that they can kind of change the system a little bit and help them feel empowered.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but it occurs to me a couple of thoughts as we're talking about this, especially in this time. First of all, we typically think of how family members deal with death in the hospital situation. And so the mere fact that you're actually focusing on the people who have to face it more than anybody, the doctors and the medical professionals, I just think that is an incredible idea, because once the medical professional is in a better position psychologically and emotionally and empathetically to deal with it, it seems like that would accrue more beneficially to the family members and patients as well. But just your thoughts, and again, we know you're from the world of the arts, you're not from the medical profession. You've been having these conversations a lot with doctors and people who do deal with this. In this very rare situation that we're in now, where we've had hundreds and hundreds of deaths across the country and in Massachusetts, where the family members don't get to be there at the last minute. There's this real pain of separation. Is there something to this work you're doing that lends itself to being helpful there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I was talking with one of my colleagues the other day about one of the most poignant conversations we had around this, which was a doctor sharing how a patient was dying and their loved one climbed in bed with them, and just, spent a few minutes kind of curled up together, and how that's not possible today. So, I mean, I think this work is an opportunity for people to process kind of what they're going through. It's, as we've seen, a really challenging time and a moment for doctors. And, in some sense, there's opportunities for this sort of ideal death. And then there's, moments that we're going through now where things probably are not ideal. And unfortunately, this work is not going to solve that. I wish the arts had more power. But I think what the arts can do is help people reflect on the experience that they had and how people sort of move forward from that, and process it both through reflecting on the work and also being together. All this work is done in small teams, and we keep the teams very small to about 10 people so that everyone has a chance to to have their voice heard if they need it. And this conversation actually came from feedback that we got from one of the doctors that we work with, that she, when we were crafting this program, really wanted a conversation that talked about this difficult topic of death in the hospitals. And so I think similarly, after this settles down a little bit, we'll go back to our medical partners and say, where are the areas that we should really lean into going forward with the arts and through these programs to help people.
Did you have another slide? I couldn't remember.
There is one more. Yes. So this is our final one, and this is probably also relevant to your question just now. We end many of our workshops in this beautiful immersive space called our Buddhist Temple Room, which is sort of dark lighting and surrounded by these sculptures and just in a quiet area of the museum, and do a quick kind of meditation exercise with people. And so the idea behind that is the importance of physicians caring for themselves as well as caring for patients. To your point, if they're not feeling supported, if they're not feeling, grounded, it's going to be hard for them to care for other people. So we do a quick meditation exercise, and definitely encourage and make it quick intentionally, that, you might only have 5 minutes in the hospital. And so here is something you can do for that 5 minutes, and, find a space that is immersive. one of the advantages, obviously, of where the MFA is located is we are right next to many hospitals and Harvard Medical School. And so we also encourage people, to take time to come back and maybe just spend an hour in the museum because it is within walking distance.
So as we kind of look to a post-COVID world, it feels like this work that you're doing with doctors and medical professionals is just so incredibly timely, important, and wonderful. And we have on the screen now some of the feedback that you've received from some of the medical professionals that you've worked with. I'll just read them for those who maybe can't see them if your screens are too small. The connections we were able to make with our lives/jobs were really powerful. I hadn't thought about art in this way before. It was a great opportunity for reflection. And I assume these are for medical professionals, right, Brooke?
Yep.
I was surprised at the depth of conversation about each piece. I rarely spend such time reflecting on art, so I found it very powerful. And actually, spending time reflecting is a skill, whether it's on art or virtually anything in life. It feels like time is the thing we don't have usually, and we seem to have an awful lot in our homes right now. And actually, it's probably a good time to practice this skill of reflecting because it's so useful. And the final comment, hearing that my peers and professors have similar concerns, fears, anxieties, reminds me that I'm not the only one with worries. And that has to just be so validating to the participants in your program.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, that's one of the wonderful takeaways that I get in every session really is that people are willing to open up, which I really appreciate because that, that's hard. It's exposing yourself. But again, I think the art helps people with that. And that, they feel closer to their colleagues. They feel like, they're all sharing in this experience and in this moment. And I think it helps to break down some barriers that, that maybe were there before they had this chance to open up.
We have a question that has come in from one of our people joining us on the chat today. The anonymous attendee writes, "It is so wonderful to hear about all that you are doing. How do you see your work evolving when so many could be utilizing your services to process so much?" As I watch this and listen to you, Brooke, I think, oh my gosh, this should be available to the whole world. And then they suggest working with creative development organizations, maybe online, to further connect our future with arts and health. How do you see the evolution?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, something we were exploring sort of before all this happened and now seems even more necessary. A lot of my colleagues, I don't at the moment, but a lot of my colleagues in this work with businesses and professionals in that area, because a lot of the skills, team building skills, communication skills, empathy skills, are useful in multiple fields. So I think that's a definite direction that we could go online. I think, it'll be interesting to see how this Zoom event goes with this doctor that I'm working with at MGH, and hopefully we can get that off the ground and kind of pilot that because it opens it up to more people. I think one of the things that we've experienced in the past is that doctors are so busy that it's hard for them to make the time to come to a museum, or, when they have a break, understandably, they want to see their family. So, maybe by doing more virtual and doing more online, we can reach more people, whether that's more doctors or just individuals in general, helping with these skills.
I keep thinking of basically the general public, all right, me, but anybody. And people who even consider themselves, vibrant and well-adjusted and happy, healthy people. It's just been really hard for everybody to be stuck at home for so many weeks in a row, something we could have never anticipated. And also sort of this sense of not knowing how much longer, what the future's going to be like, what the world's going to be like, that sort of anxiety of the unknown, of the lack of visibility, and all of these things that you're talking about in terms of having a relationship with the visual arts, certainly with music and dance and other, we're talking about the visual arts today. What skill, I mean, if I can look at a painting in my own home or open up a book and look at a painting before we're allowed to go back to the museums. What should I be doing to help make that process of looking and seeing and reflecting really helpful? Give us some tips.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, one thing that I've been thinking a lot about and have heard a lot of people mention is kind of similar to what you're saying, the sort of ambiguity of the moment. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the future is. There's so many questions. And I think art can really help with understanding ambiguity and sort of building skills of how to cope with ambiguity. Going back to the Kokoschka painting in the beginning, we talk a lot about what do you do when you don't know the answer? I intentionally stand in front of the label when we're looking at that work of art, so people can't read the answer and know exactly what it is, and how do you cope with that? So I think art can help a lot with this question of ambiguity and feeling more comfortable in that space. I think it also gives a chance to reflect and to open up. So, thinking about these open-ended questions of, how does this relate to my life at the moment? Another exercise that a colleague does is called joys and struggles. And so looking at a work of art and saying, what are the joys that I'm sort of pulling out and reflecting on in this piece at the moment? And what are the struggles? And, sometimes they're very related and they're very similar, and sometimes they're completely different. But giving people that space to step back and reflect, I think, is something that art can definitely help with.
When you say joys and struggles, just even bringing that up makes me realize that the source for joy and struggle could be the exact same thing. Being at home.
Exactly.
I used to look at joy, oh boy, I get to go home and be home. But now it's like, oh my gosh, I got to be home. And so how do you separate that and focus on the joy part and less on the struggle part?
Right. It's so true. And I think just giving a voice to that can help people feel powerful too.
If you were going to give all of us one little homework assignment, we are heading into the weekend. We're not going to be bored. We're going to put our laptops away and we're going to do a fun art thing. And we're going to open up. Everybody's got either a work of art in their home or a reproduction or a book with art in it, or just go online and find a work of art. Give us the questions to ask it ourselves and really think about to practice this reflecting exercise.
Sure. So I think I'd give you an art making exercise, actually. That's something that I haven't had a chance to talk about in this, and something that we incorporate every time because I like to, tap into people's different learning styles and sort of modalities. So we do a lot of discussion, but we also make things. And so I would encourage everyone to get a pencil and a piece of paper. It can be a Post-it note, can be anything. And just spend some time looking at a work of art, looking at a flower in your garden and sketching. I think it allows you to really slow down. It allows you to see the details and also the bigger picture, and just gives you that moment of reflection that's active. And it doesn't matter what your sketch looks like. At the end of the day, no one's going to see it. But I think it will give you sort of a moment of peace. That's often what people talk about when I tell the doctors they're going to sketch. There's sort of a, fear in their eyes, because I think, not all of them are artists. But after they really appreciate that moment to just slow down and take a minute to be sort of in the moment. And I think drawing a work of art or anything gives you that.
We have a message that has come in from our Facebook Live. We are on Facebook Live. And this is from Catherine White McPhail, who says, "Thank you so much for this talk from an old art history major." I don't think Catherine, you're not an old art history major. You're never. Art history is forever, right, Brooke?
That's right. Yeah, and I think, she brings up a really good point that there's so many ways to use art. There's ways to learn about culture, there's ways to learn about history, and this is another way. This is a way to use art to build skills, and I have found it really rewarding, I think, for me as the teacher, and for the participants too.
And it is a powerful, powerful source of well-being. And we could all use a little bit more of that right now. Brooke, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing at the MFA, for all of your work with the medical professionals. I kind of feel like, in a way, our art and our artists are going to be the first responders to the first responders as we come out of the other side of this, because we all need art more than ever. Thank you for your work, and thank you for joining us today on Culture Chat.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for advocating so we can keep doing our work. I appreciate it.
Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.